And we're on.
We are live. Okay, let me get my script together. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining Canem and Bowery Poetry for this very exciting reading and conversation between Destiny Birdsong and Tarfia Fezula. We're very excited to have both of these very talented writers with us today and to hear from them. I am Malcolm Tariq, Programs and Communications Manager at Canem, North America's premier home for Black poetry. Next year, we celebrate our 25th year, which is very exciting. You can follow us on social media at Canem Poets and go to our website to sign up for our newsletter, where we publish more information about upcoming events, book contests, and workshops, and you'll definitely hear more about what we have planned for the rest of the season and for our 25th anniversary next year. I want to send special thanks to Mahogany Brown at Bowery Poetry for working with me on this event and for being an all-around superstar with everything she has going on right now. And also to Cynthia Norman, who is providing ASL interpretations, also superstar. Love working with both of these women for this event and other events as well. If you want to ask, after the event, there'll be a Q&A with Destiny and Tarfia. If you have a question, you can put that in the chat and I will get to it. We'll collect them and answer them at the end. I think that's about it. So I'm gonna introduce our speakers and I'll give the stage to them. They'll each do readings and then be in conversation with one another. And then we'll do a Q&A if there are any questions. So I'm very excited to celebrate Destiny Birdsong's newest collection, her first collections, Negotiations, which was just released from Tin House last week. Congratulations, Destiny. Destiny Birdsong is a Louisiana-born poet, essayist, and fiction writer whose debut poetry collection, Negotiation, was just published with Tin House Books. She has received support from Canem, Callaloo, Jack Jones, Literary Arts, Pink Door, McDowell, the Ragdale Foundation, and Tin House, where she was a 2018 Summer Workshop Scholar. She earned both her MFA and PhD from Vanderbilt University and now lives and works in Nashville, Tennessee. Tarfia Fezula is the author of 2 poetry collections, Registers of Illuminated Villages and Steam. The recipient of a Fulbright Fellowship, 3 Pushcart Prizes, and other honors, Tarfia presents work at institutions and organizations worldwide, and in collaborations include photographers, producers, composers, filmmakers, musicians, and visual artists, resulting in several interdisciplinary projects. In 2016, Tarfia was recognized by Harvard Law School as one of 50 women inspiring change. Tarfia is a 2019 United States Artist Fellow. Born in Brooklyn, New York to Bangladeshi immigrants and raised in Texas, Tarfia currently lives in Dallas. I also love that we just have a room full of Southerners today, so it's an extra bonus for me. Please welcome Destiny and Tarfia.
Thank you so much. Destiny, congratulations. I'm so excited to be here with you tonight. I have your book right here. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here with you too. When I was asked to do this, they asked me to send a list. And I didn't put you on the top of the list because I didn't want to look too thirsty, but I was like, let it be her. So.
I really appreciate that. I feel really blessed to be here with you tonight. So I think we're going to read some poems. I think I'm going to read first and then you're going to read. That's what we're doing. Okay, sweet. All right. I'm going to read primarily from Seam because this seems to be an occasion about first books and that feels really exciting to me. And I also sort of think of my books as children and I believe in one-on-one special time alone with the other. So I'm gonna just read from Seam tonight. I'm going to move around a little bit and just sort of read random selections. This is En route to Bangladesh, another crisis of faith. And it's a poem that I wrote at Dubai International Airport, and it ends with a line by the poet Cesar Vallejo. Because I must walk through the eye-shaped shadows cast by these curved gold leaves, thick atop each constructed palm tree, past displays of silk scarves, lit silhouettes of blue bottled perfume. Because I grip as though for the first time, a paper bag of French fries from McDonald's and lick from each fingertip the fat and salt as I stand alone to the side of this moving walkway, gliding me past dark-eyed men who do not look away when I stare squarely back. Because standing in line to the restroom, I want only to pluck from her black sweater this one shimmering blonde hair clinging fast. Because I must rest the Coke cold in my hand beside this toilet seat warmed by her thighs and hers. Here at the narrow mouth of this long, humid corridor leading to the plane, I take my place among this damp, dark horde of men and women who look like me, because I look like them, because I am ashamed of their bodies that reek so unabashedly of body, because I am an American, a star of blood on the surface of muscle. I've been thinking about traveling a lot. I think that before the pandemic started, I was doing a lot of traveling, and this is the longest stretch that I've been home for a long time. And it's been really interesting to get used to that feeling of being in one place. But I'm noticing that I want to read poems that are a little bit about travel. Dhaka Obad, and Dhaka is the capital city of Bangladesh. Dhaka Obad. Outside, too fragile not to consider, rebar puncturing sky, empty sweet boxes stacked into columns, another call to prayer loud then waning. Even this mosquito netting boxing my bed is in danger. I wake from some dream that leaves me doubled over in this light cutting away half of me. How can people hurt each other, go on living? Today, I don't want anything to touch me. I dreamt that you were resurrected, no longer bone erasing bone. This water, lustrous with so many people's shit, continues to tunnel, relentless. How do I love as much as I say I do? Sorry, y'all, I'm gonna close this window because there is a lawnmower. I'm going to read this next poem from my grandmother. It also is a poem that borrows some lines from the poet Tomas Tranströmer. Reading Tranströmer in Bangladesh for Mehrun-Nisa Chaudhuri. In grandmother's house, we are each a room that must remain locked. Inside it, a prayer mat carelessly folded on a low table, as though hands that once pressed down on it are not now below ground. Who has stripped bare the white walls of the black velvet tapestry depicting Kaaba, house of God? I let in the netherworld. Something rose from underneath. I sit, wade through my cousin's sobs. This morning, another sudden loss. A classmate's death, she says. Sordid details flare out like sails of a ship. Mother trapped in an asylum, father weeping, his son's warm corpse cradled in his arms, the chicken bones still lodged in his young throat. To whom would this not be an inelegant death, a caught bone like one of our own? We enter the familiar city, cloaked nightly in fog, light bulbs, lanterns, blurred gold, the rumbling traffic on the highways and the silent traffic of ghosts. I reach for my mother's hand like a child. Here hang the years. They sleep with folded wings. Already, I want to shed each jagged dirt road, bodies jostled inside each swerving car, trains draped with bodies dangling like writhing vines. The cars packed tight do not move. I saw the image of a man coming forward. Sudden as starlight, he lifts an arm, mere bone, wrapped in brown skin, stem of an iris rotting in water. He taps the glass. I close my eyes, see the bone of his arm trapped in a young boy's throat. It is still beautiful to hear the heart, but often the shadow seems more real than the body. How thin the seam between the world and the world. A few layers of muscle and fat, a sheet wrapped around a corpse, glass, so easily ground into sand. I'm going to read a couple of poems from a long sequence in the middle of the book called Interview with a Birongona, which is a honorary term given to a woman who was raped in Bangladesh during wartime. And the history, a little bit of historical background is that in 1971, there was a war in which Bangladesh won its independence from Pakistan, but one of the sacrifices was that 200,000 women were raped during that time. So you'll hear two voices. You'll hear the voice of the interviewer, and you'll hear the voices of the women survivors. Interview with the Birangana. Where did the Pakistani military take you? And were there others there? Past the apothecary shop, shut down, burned flat. My heart seized, I told it to hush. They saw its shape and weight and wanted it too. Past the red mosque where I first learned to touch my forehead low, to utter the wet words blown from my mouth again and again. Past the school draped with banners imploring free our language, a rope steady around my throat as they pushed me toward the dark room. The silence clotted thick with a rotten smell, dense like pear blossoms, long strands of jute braided fast around our wrists. Yes, there were others there. Interviewer's note. Today there is no drinking water. Today there is no light. Today there is only kerosene, the hum of a generator pulsing deep into the exhausted darkness. You write the word shame. It is possible to live without memory, Nietzsche said, but is it possible to live with it? And I'm just gonna close with the final little, I don't know what to call this exactly. I think of it as a paragraph more than a poem, but there's like a little paragraph that ends the collection. And I'm gonna just close with that. And thank y'all again so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here to celebrate you, Destiny. Okay. I struggled my way onto a packed bus. I became all that surged past the busy roadside markets, humming with men pulling rickshaws heavy with bodies. A light breeze from the river was cool on our faces through the open windows. Eager passengers ran alongside us. The bus slowed down. A young man grabbed those arms, pulled them through. The moon filled the dust-polluted sky, a ripe, unsheathed lychee. It wasn't enough light to see clearly by, but I still turned my face toward it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Taifia. That was gorgeous. I was rereading your collection last night and you read like some of my favorite poems. So thank you. And thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Mahogany, for hosting this event. Thanks, Bowery Poetry and Cave Canem, as always. And thank you, Cynthia, for signing for this event. I wanted to read a poem from each of the major sections of the book. And I'll start with the first section. And this poem is called I Too Sing America. But mostly when it's convenient, When I'm abroad, I fucking love the Constitution, the gall of the forefathers still tittering in their received pronunciation, sauced up since whiskey was more sanitary than water. And when the woman runs out of her shop on Cowley, where I'm fingering scarves on the sidewalk, I aim my accent at her and pull the trigger. No one ever says nigger, but we lock eyes and she know I know what she means. I learned to count pound and pence after I kept getting incorrect change. Who steals the most? Who steals what is most valuable? I palm 2 bottles of nail lacquer, wander upstairs for the cookies and shit. I'm always hungry. The portions are always too small. I need more dressing. I hear music coming from a rucksack and I dance in the crosswalk. At the opposite end, a brown man tells me my backpack has hiked up my skirt. I wink and say soon, you won't give a fuck about my body. That's assimilation. He smiles, says carefully, have a nice day. Elsewhere, I'm paying extra for the excursion. I want to swim with the pigs. I need to touch something else that can be offered for a small fee or slaughtered. I'm high on hash browns and all black service. I could be dead in Seattle, in Baltimore, Nebraska. What you want from me? What you got that won't get me killed? I ask this of every land I've planted my feet on and loved. Like the forefathers, it tables the difficult questions. Ocean water slicks my thighs. I submerge, watch schools of zebrafish graze my sister's palms. Sand softened, like the leather handbag she bought in Atlanta, her bracelet tapping the emblem like a prisoner, making music to the knock of waves in the hull of the women being dragged upstairs. The ancestors never had it so good. Maybe the children will. Another man on the beach grates his stubble with a bleached towel, waves a coconut, and says he can make it as strong as I like. I am carnivorous and cannibal. I tip my room key and a smile. When I leave, I put all my cards in their holsters. I go like Darren, like Geronimo, no convictions, and I declare nothing. And this next poem is called Autoimmune. Because there are no disposal laws for syringes in this state, I keep a bleach jug packed with syringes. Once in a dry-lipped fugue, I dropped 2 pins in a new one. Now the laundry is blood-fracked with syringes. Even so, I believe it's clean coming out of the dryer. The white-coated vampire states it as fact. Syringes rinse the surgeries away. She's got a house to feed, where tiny mouths drool fluid like prime syringes. I'm not dying yet, but she wants to be sure. She asks me to deliver a ransom of syringes. Labs, she calls them. Needle-nosed hounds dispatched by her keyboard. She doesn't actually handle syringes. Instead, she sends me to a different wing. The phlebotomists thump the anticoagulant in my syringes. Stop telling people that ain't your hair when you bought it. They pull blood, but inject beauty, compassionate syringes. On the drive home, the guardrails look like casket lowers, lane markings, a mortician's stitch, the cars, blunt syringes hunting out home, the vina cava, in which I brine a life, my flesh as seasoned by syringes as my mother's holiday turkeys. I'm suspended between every ancestor who ever lived or treasoned with syringes. Their ghosts OD in my dreams. Riddled with holes, they beg me to remember their names. I ask which syringes could bring them back to life. I awaken to track marks under my nose. A new plot of syringes dampens on the front steps. I am destined to infuse survival with meaning, like honey clotting in syringes. Hypervigilance. At night, I peel off my skin and hang it inside my closet door. I like the feel of walking around without questions. Sometimes I stand over the pots on the stove, let the heat seep through my breastbone like a balm. Sometimes I sit in front of the box fan and sing into the stream of air. My voice splinters, comes back to me as chorus. Sometimes I fly short distances, like from the first floor landing to the foot of the stairs. I like the way air feels on the exposed flexors in my feet. It reminds me there are many ways to getting free. When I'm done, I crawl into bed. My thoughts billow like open tints against the sky, its luminous grain. Into this, he walks like a husband returning from the fields. But we never talk about the fields. He starts by recovering my day, naming each stuttered word, each moment I've held open my hand, awaiting the grasp of another. He cups my face with its lidless eyes and shudders, tells me never to have children. He slips into my skin suit, performs a pantomime. He laughs about my secrets, remembers my childhood names, which he grinds into the air with his peppered tongue. The flakes fall against my houseless flesh. In the morning, I must return to my skin. Beneath it, I will burn until it is night. Love poem that ends at Popeyes. It's Valentine's Day and I hear tires on the slick streets. It is raining, a slow, steady rain. The kind that makes me saddest because it seems endless. And even after, the sky, having forgotten its big-eyed blue, stands aloof now, distant, while the sun, mumbling from her side of the bed, settles herself into a light doze. I am thinking of the meal I won't have to brave those streets, clamp-thighed in a passenger seat to eat, or the flowers I will not have to accept awkwardly because flowers are such strange gifts. Why undress the ground just to prove I'm special? We could go to the botanical gardens, hold hands, smell the smells that come at me all at once in a sneeze, or we could pull over on the highway, run through fields of bonnets so buckled with sky they look bruised. Why has no one ever loved me the way a bonnet might engorge itself with blue? So much it is a new color, unnameable, breathless. My loves hold their breaths calculating. They want me to look at the food and the flowers and the tiny golden heart run through with the golden thread and say, thank you, thank you. Yes, I am wearing silver, but now I will wear only gold. And they expect me to lie down quickly as if we're children and the fields are bloated with green and it is May. Somewhere, the man who doesn't love me, though I wish I could say the same, is pacing a supermarket floor. His body a reflection in the waxed tile. Really, he is two men, one flesh man, one floor man, and both are moving in a direction away from me. They are picking out fistfuls of roses or maybe tulips, maybe assorted flowers with daffodils. And he knows the woman he really loves will dip her nose into them like a doe and say, thank you, thank you. And she will kiss him with her tacky lips. And for the first time, I am not angry that he might lay her down and ask if he can do the things he will do. Of course, she will say yes. That's what you say when you love someone, right? That's what I would say. And this time, not because I've learned what happens when you say no or when you say nothing at all. I am not sad about whatever she will let him do or what she will do to him to make him smile, make his mouth form and his breath catch the emptiness where a few of his teeth used to be and make it ache. It's a good ache when something is missing and people still love you. I want him to be satisfied. I want him to be happy. Also, I want to be happy. We can do that separately or we can do it together. We can do it now or we can do it later. I am a hopeless romantic. I still make wishes before I blow out candles. And last week, I asked an oracle when, not if, I'd find true love. It said, bad reception, Try again, girl. And I am trying. I am lying in bed with my arms around myself, thinking of what I will eat when I get hungry. I am willing to wait for what I want. Like when I pull up to the window and the cashier says it'll take 10 minutes for the spicy dark. And I say, yeah, that's okay. I still want it. And I pull my car over and I play my music. And I imagine the fried flecks of flour smothering in the saliva of my mouth. And oh, the biscuits, and oh, the honey, and oh, the red beans in their salty velvet. And I think this is my own gold. It is not daffodil gold. It is not supermarket roses gold. It is not a thin stringed gold attached to a locket of expectations with my face clasped between two composite hearts. But it is good and it is filling and it is enough. And because I like to end in joy, I will end with an ode to masturbation called Ode to My Penis. Pill crusher, needle flusher, coconut oiler of legs and the untouched space beneath breasts, butcher, baker, bathwater maker. And when 10,000 fall at my side and the phone goes dry, you are my hitching post of God's great grace. Bottle shaker, chalice faker, everything that ever poisoned us passed through, so too have the cures. You raised me from the dead, sinister digits. And if there's a right way to stroke raw honey from the lioness's mouth, you stumble, but find it every time, palm grazing her grizzle. How the swarm quiets for a moment. The pupilled areolas dilate their vein-webbed fronds. Oh, girl, who else rides me safely through Jerusalem, unsaddled on her simple back, or massages my slippery feet with her whorled hair? I'll never let your tunic drag the ground of want again. We'll have each other and live like Lazarus, unraveling his spool in the sister's stunned silence, the death oils slipping from his skin. Savior, you track mirrored light into my wilderness, a little spit, a little mud. At the first touch, I saw men as monstrous as marching trees. Then, after a second touch, just trees. Thank you so much.
Yes, that was so beautiful, Destiny.
Oh, thank you. Same to you.
Do you mind if I start us off with a question?
No, not at all. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's a pretty standard one, and I imagine you must be a little tired of answering it, but what's it like to have your first book out right now, especially right now?
I feel, well, pandemic, I think that for me, one of the benefits of this being my first book is that I didn't really have a precedent for what it was supposed to feel like and how the launch was supposed to look or any of that stuff. So it's certainly strange. I presumed I would have like an in-person book launch. I presumed I would travel, and those things didn't happen. Although I am sometimes agoraphobic, so not traveling is not the worst for me. Like I think I certainly would have done it, but I don't necessarily feel like I've like missed out by staying at home. I like to err on the side of safety and being alive tomorrow, so I'm cool with that. But I feel remarkably calm, which is not a thing I do well at all. I am never calm, but I feel calm. I certainly have hopes and dreams for the book, but it's felt really good to see it in other people's hands and like people I've met over the years who I just presumed maybe had forgotten about me or forgotten that I was writing. They're picking up the book and reading it and saying wonderful things about it. So it feels good. It's only been 6 days though, so it's a very new feeling, but it feels it feels all right. Yeah.
Excellent. I have a follow-up question about it because I feel like reading this book, so many of the poems felt so present and written for right this moment. But could you tell us a little bit about the span of the thing itself, the span of the process, how long it took you to put this collection together, and anything else you want to share about it?
Yeah, sure. So I started doing it in earnest in 2017. So I decided maybe a little bit earlier. Like I'd gone to my last Canem in 2015, and I kind of said to myself that I needed to get serious about finishing my first manuscript, which I presumed was going to be some iteration of my MFA thesis, which by then was, oh gosh, maybe 6 or 7 years old by then. And fast forward to 2017, and I did my first 30-30, which is like 30 poems in 30 days during April, which is National Poetry Month. And I thought that out of those 30 poems, I would find the poems that I needed to finish that first book. But later that summer, I went to a few residencies. I went to Callaloo, and then I was at Ragdale, which is right outside Chicago, for about a month. And it was when I was at Ragdale that I started looking at the poems I'd written back in April. And I was like, I don't think these poems are talking to that other manuscript that I'm trying to finish. I think that these are new. And I wrote the title poem Negotiations while I was at Ragdale. And I was like, I think this is like the locus of a new collection. And so it kind of started then. The oldest poems though in the book, which, let's see, Macular Conception and the History of Dolls, those are like from 2015. So I would say 3 years of sort of work, well, 2.5 years of sort of working on it in earnest, and then and with some poems that are a few years older.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to hear how long a thing takes, because especially when it comes together as a final product, it seems like it's always been here this way.
Yeah, and I think like the thing that they say about art, about musicians is true. It's like you spend your whole life writing your first album. And I think that's certainly true about this book. Like, I was kind of working on it for those 3 years, but I certainly feel like some of the poems that came to be are ones that I'd been trying to write some version of for as long as I, had called myself a writer, and they didn't, they came when they were ready. And I think timing is divine. And it is weird to like read the book. Like I have a poem that just came out in the Boston Review, and it was written about the 2016 election. It's weird to read that poem now in the context of the 2020 election. So it has been kind of a surprise for me too, to like be rereading these poems and rereading the book and thinking like, oh wow, like these things are still happening. But the truth is like, this is America, and some of the stuff has like always been happening. But yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. Yeah, so like 2 years, but maybe a lifetime, Yeah.
I totally get that. Timing is divine. I feel that.
Mm-hmm. I do too. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned at the start of your reading that you kind of think of your books as children, which is exactly how I think of my books. And I wanted to know how your first child changed you, if it did. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great question. That's a really beautiful question. How did it change me? I don't know. I think I never expected it to be a book, actually. I mean, as I was writing it, I think one always has hopes that it will become a book, like a real thing in the world, for others to touch. But I also personally feel a lot of dread about that process too, about it actually being in the world and me not necessarily being able to protect it, or, quite doubts about whether or not I built something to last, or I built something worth sharing. But I think all of those anxieties and insecurities started to change the more, I don't know, just the more that Seam was in the world, I guess. I mean, I was really surprised by the wideness of readership that occurred. And I'm a really shy person. I don't know if that always tracks, because what we do is sort of public. And so if you see me, you're going to see me out. And if I'm out, I'm going to make the best of it. So I'm not going to be super introverted when I'm out. But I'm actually really shy and bookish and nerdy and solitary. So I think for me, one of the ways the book changed me is that it made me a more public person. Because suddenly there was there was this object that I really wanted to stand beside, that I really believed in, and having to advocate for it, I think changed me from a really shy, hesitant person into one who was more willing to speak my mind.
Oh, wow. Yeah. You mentioned like advocating for the book. Can you talk a little bit more about that if you feel comfortable?
Sure. Well, I think for me, I struggle sometimes with, I think we all do, with sort of the terms like promotion or marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that idea of, is the book, a work of art, or is it something that you're selling? And I think that when you're in an industry like writing, I think one's awareness of those borders, I think, become really interesting. So I think that there were just ways where, like even doing readings, even being willing to read the poems out loud. I would go when I was in high school and college. I went to a lot of slams, but I never participated. I was one of those kids who was in the audience in awe of everybody else who was up there on stage. So I feel like just even the act of feeling like a poem can occupy space and breath in my own life and then in someone else's life is really extraordinary to me. I think that's a form of advocacy. And then I also think just, yeah, like advocating for me, SEAM especially was about the women who had been affected by the 1971 war and the idea of survivorship and wanting to advocate more for survivors, both as myself as a survivor, as well as other survivors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you? How has the book changed you?
Gosh, well, I will say that one of the things that has changed me is like, I think like you, like even after the book had been picked up, you just wonder, like, are people going to read it? Are they going to care? That it's out in the world. And having to do that work of that advocacy work, like, inviting people to read it, inviting people to do interviews and things like that. I certainly felt awkward while doing it. Like it feels uncomfortable as a person who, like you, is an introvert and who spends a lot of time alone and who kind of, relishes that aloneness, and then having to like put my face on and like go on a Zoom and things like that. Like it's been difficult, but I think what's been really wonderful about it is just knowing that other people like got what I was trying to do, which, like you, is like advocate for survivorhood, like both personal and communal, right? Like it's been wonderful for people to read things and say, like, I get that, or like I felt that, or thank you for saying this thing that I have been saying or I've been wanting to say. Like, I think that has changed me for the better, and it makes me feel like, whatever happens to this book, like, that I've been able to do that is really valuable. So that part's been good. And just to like feel the love from my own community, like my very private, select friends and family community. Like I'm just not a person who expects my friends to like read my stuff or like do any of that. I'm like, you can if you want to, you don't have to.
Yeah.
It might make our conversations less awkward, but it's been so wonderful having people close to me read it, and to say things like, wow, I didn't understand this about you until now. Or one of my friends was like, I now get why you would never come out with me when you were like, I'm writing, like, now I get what you were doing. And like, that's been really sweet to hear. But yeah, just to feel their love. And I mean, I think like you too, like I have certain anxieties about what it means for that book to be out in the world. And like some of the poems in the book, like I certainly worry about people reading them, and like I don't want to like pass along my pain, like I really want people to know, like, I'm okay. So that anxiety is still lingering, but it feels really good to have something in the world that resonates, with the people who said as much. So
yeah, it's so interesting how there's the fear of speaking, and then when you do speak, how people connect to it and then reflect back. It's really powerful. I love what you said about your friends and family. I always feel really shy and embarrassed when it comes to my friends and family reading my poems. I'm like, don't look over there. Nothing's going on. Don't even worry about it.
Right.
It looks like there's a question from Mahogany. It says, both Destiny and Tarfia managed to make a home in the interior political as well as the capital P political. Is the urgency the same for the interior life as the political? Is there a difference? You want to take that on first?
Okay. Urgency. Okay. I hope I'm reading this question right. Well, maybe this is a good answer no matter what, no matter how I'm reading it. You know, when I sit down to write poems, you know, I have the luxury of living alone. And so I create this sort of artificial, like space where like no one will ever read this poem. And this is my poem and I can do what I want with it and I can say what I want in it and nothing else matters, right? That's like the first pass. And then as I revise and as I start thinking about how this work will exist in a public space, I don't know. I used to feel a kind of urgency about getting work out, but I guess I'll go back to what I said about timing, which I think is divine. And I am not the kind of poet who can just like call somebody up and be like, hey, I've got a poem about this hot new topic. You want to publish it? Like, that is not a thing that's possible for me. So the kind of urgency in terms of like making a public home for myself, I try to let that happen organically. I am not thinking about it when I'm drafting work. I am only thinking about it sort of at the sort of, you know, the far end of creation and, right before I'm sending it out, I start to think about those things. And I think in terms of the political or the personal, I don't, I don't know that those things are separate for me. And yeah, no, I think for me, the urgency is just to get it out on the page. And what happens after that, after I've done all my work, I just kind of put it in God's hands and it sort of gets where it needs to get. It goes where it's going to go. I don't know if that was the nature of the question, but I hope I answered it.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I hear you talking about is the idea of a poem as sort of a thing that can connect to both the interior and the political life at the same time, just by virtue of, I think, people being, I don't know, like I think people being alive in this moment and any attempt or effort at thinking about the political, I think becomes part of the shaping of a poem. I guess the way I want to answer that question is there was like a podcast where they discussed Seam, and one of the criticisms of Seam, which I've heard before, is that the poems are too beautiful, that they're too lyrical, especially thinking about writing from the perspective of survivors. One of the criticisms I heard in that podcast that I thought was really interesting was about, like, well, these women went through a lot and clearly their voices wouldn't be that lyrical. And I thought that was really interesting because where does it say anywhere that somebody who has undergone something horrific is not capable of beautiful or lyrical thoughts? Like, I think in a way, in fact, when we're broken in some way or some kind of breakage happens, I think it creates the opportunity for that awareness of beauty and suffering to exist in the same place. And so I feel similarly about the political and the interior, that they're sort of where they overlap is actually, I think, a little blurrier than maybe can be imagined. I think when we're taking on the work of trying to really see the world and describe the world that we see and all of its complexity, I think that becomes a political act in and of itself.
Yeah, that's, oh gosh, so many things about that response that I completely agree with. That you cannot create beauty from pain, or that you're not capable of that somehow because you have been traumatized, just feels really, really ugly and sad to me.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, and yeah, like I don't think that anything that happened to me that found its way in that book can be extricated from from the sort of socio-political um, influences of like what, you know, of what my decisions were, of what other people did, of some of the things I had to unravel and sort of like unlatch myself from in the process. Like, you know, and I think particularly sexual violence is, as your book has so beautifully made clear, like it is a political tactic. It is a function of war. It is you know, like it is it is you know, as part of our social fabric as anything. And but it is still at its core very, very personal experience, which is why it's hard to kind of say that to me it feels wild to say to someone like, oh, how can you make that into something beautiful? It's like, well, it's my thing and I get to do what I want with it. Like and that's something I've been really interested in, is like how survivors are treated. It's just sort of like, I've been writing about this, but like it seems like there's a right way to kind of do this thing, but nobody knows what that right way is, but they definitely know what the wrong way is. And the wrong way is however survivors are doing it. Like, and you're just like, how, what? You know, like it's wild to think about sometimes that like when such a personal and also political act um has been committed against you, that you then become responsible for some kind of decorum or professionalism or whatever in the telling. Like, yeah, I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, the game is rigged for sure. It is for sure rigged. Should we answer more of these questions? Okay, so another question is, how do you begin writing again once the first book is complete? Do you dive right in? Is there space and time for that?
I'll let you go because you have 2 minutes.
All right. How do you begin writing again? I don't know. How do you begin writing again? I mean, I think for me, it's sort of like I'm kind of always writing. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't see the light of day. And so I feel like a lot of there's a question, I think, after a certain point. I think the first book is sort of this miracle, like, oh, I can't believe everybody pulled it off. That's crazy. And then I think as it's happening, I think I'm usually working on something else. And I do that on purpose, I think, because I think there can be a real loneliness when you have a book out in the world. I don't know, maybe I'm just, maybe this is just me, but I think I just want to restore and repair my relationship to writing as there's this thing that's happening publicly. So I feel like I'm always sort of privately nurturing stuff. And the longer I go without talking about it, I think sometimes the better. I think sometimes there's this expectation of sort of like, what's the next thing you're doing? You know, what are you working on now? And I think it's really, on one hand, irresistible to sort of feel like, well, I should be working on something coherent and specific. But let me wrap up this long ramble, which is to just say that I think the act of writing is sort of really boring in the sense that it's an active, muscular discipline, and it's sort of like working out, which I don't always like to do, and I usually dread, but I usually feel better once I do it. And I feel a little bit like that about writing too.
Yeah, I agree. I think I am always writing something, right? Like, and it might not be, I don't necessarily see myself as sort of a project based writer, which I think is sometimes like inadvertently like what that question kind of suggests, is that you write this, you like, I am going to write a book, and then everything you write for the next 6 months goes into the book, and then you're like, I am going to write another book. And then like it's like the process starts over again, which is, some people might do that. That's not my process at all. You know, there, like you said, there's so much stuff that doesn't see the light of day. I've also been writing in different genres, which is really nice. And so it feels like the work is just ongoing, even though like I'll have a second poetry book. Like, I mean, well, okay, I might have a title and a theme, but it's not a thing that I'm working on right now, or that I feel any urgency to work on. There are tons of other things to get done, along with sort of the very big task of just like making it out of this pandemic healthy and safe and sound. And like, I don't know that, even though I consider writing to be a calling, I don't think there's anything really more important than that. And sometimes, even when there's not like this huge external threat, like you just have to rest, like rest is also divine, like, and the opportunity to sort of sit back and reflect and to think about what's important is really valuable, particularly between projects, because I think sometimes for me, if I'm too focused on what's happening in this very public space with this thing that I've written, that concern might seep into what I do in my very private space, which is right. And I don't ever want that to happen. I don't ever want other people to get their fingers into that stuff. I really do want it to continue to be a sacred space for me, no matter how many books are in the world.
Yeah, I totally understand that. It reminds me of, I remember Jean Valentine once said something in a talk she was giving about how she didn't write for 2 years, and I was like, what? And it freaked me out. I remember it really strongly because it freaked me out, the idea of that. And she was talking about it so calmly. And this idea that she was still there, even if the writing wasn't, and because she was still there, the writing could come back. And I have had periods like that where I haven't written at all. But I feel sort of like my brain is working even if my pen isn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. And I think that brain work sometimes is the most important work for me, like just sort of getting things settled in my head. Like, what do I want to say? How do I want to say it? Sometimes that work happens with nothing on the page. That work is happening, and is really fruitful and robust, even though I don't see like a finished product of something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you want to talk about?
Goodness. Are you working on something now? And if so, I know, right? After all that, I had the audacity.
I am working on something. I feel shy about it. I'm not ready to talk about it yet, but I'm working on something. I have a title. I've made some headway on it. One of the pieces from it was out in the world recently in an anthology called South Asian Avant-Garde. But low key, like, I didn't post about it or anything. I'm back on the internet after literally years away. And I still feel very kind of shy and weird and hesitant about sharing the stuff that I'm working on. But that was cool to see that kind of out in the world a little bit as new. But I just didn't post about it because I've been kind of off grid a little bit the last few days in the first place. So this is how I feel when talking about new stuff. I just get really flustered and I feel really shy and uncomfortable and awkward.
That's
but
all right.
I am working on new stuff. What about you?
Cool. Yeah, I am. I feel the way you feel. Like it's cooking. Yeah, I am. Not poetry stuff. I haven't written a poem. I don't think I've written any poetry for myself this year. I worked with a project called Poetry on Demand, and I did one of those. I did a poem for one of the freedom riders who like helped desegregate Nashville in the 1960s, and then went on the bus rides down into the Deep South. I did that at the very start of the year. I don't think I've written a poem since, and I am totally okay with that. It will be there. And it will, that particular genre will make itself, known to me again when it's ready and I'm ready. But yeah, I'm working on some other stuff. It's exciting. And yeah. So.
One question I have, and it looks like we're about to close us out too, but maybe a final question is, do you feel that you're writing in response to what's happening in the moment, or do you feel like your relationship in your writing life is more to the past or to the future, or maybe tense is not something you're thinking about at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in spite of the fact that I worked with a project called Poetry on Demand, I am not a poet who does that very well. And was sometimes even when working on that project, like kind of surprised that I was able to produce things. I, you know, one of the things that I often have to tell people who read negotiations is like, the things that I'm writing about in that book happened like years ago. Like, like yes, they are very much still a part of my day-to-day life, but the immediacy that you feel in those poems, like that is memory, like that is me going back into the past and excavating things. So, and that is, I think, where I work best. It takes me a while to figure out how I feel about things. Even like from my own personal experiences to like my political affiliations and leanings, like I certainly do not see myself writing about this particular experience, like the experience of 2020 with the pandemic and the election and all of these things. I don't know that I don't even see myself doing that in the next few years. Like it may be 5-10 years down the road. So for me, there's always a lag, and I need that because I need to figure out how I feel about something and what I think needs to be said about something, which I'm not great at doing in the moment. I need time and quiet and reflection and drafts and poems that will and should never see the light of day. So but I think that with I've been thinking loosely about another collection, and what I do think about that collection is that I am interested in creating a future for myself in that collection. And maybe that's why I haven't been working on it, because I'm not really great at doing that, and I'm not sure how to do it. But I do think that that's something that I'm interested in, is like writing toward a future self, and seeing what develops out of that attempt. But as far as like the present, like, no, I need time.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a great place to end tonight, which is the idea of writing to the future self. Thank you so much, Destiny. Thank you so much for this beautiful collection of yours into the world.
Thank you for reading
Canem.
it. Yeah, that book was made possible by Canem. So thanks to you, Typhia, for reading with me. Thanks again to Canem, Bowery, Malcolm, Cynthia, everyone who tuned in, everyone who has bought the book or will buy the book. Thank you so much. Oh, your mic's off, Malcolm.
Sorry, okay. Thanks to both of you. This is such a beautiful conversation. I feel so, I don't know, full of goodness right now. It's such a nice way to end a Monday, which I've been confused all day, but this has been the only thing that made sense all day. So thank you so much. Destiny, do you want to tell us where you'll be next on your book tour?
Yes, so Wednesday, hold on, there are 2 readings and I want to make sure I get this right. I believe Wednesday is the Books Are Magic reading. Yes, so Wednesday at 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern, I will be reading with the Morgan Parker and the Tommy Pico, hosted by Books Are Magic. I believe that it's free, but you have to register, I think, for the Zoom event. And that stuff is on my webpage, which is destinybirdsong.com. So you can go there and look at the tour schedule and click on the links and get set up to attend that. But yeah, I'll be there in 2 days.
Wonderful. Great. I love Books Are Magic there. I did a book launch there last year. It's such a great place and staff.
Yeah.
So Canem has 2 events coming up. We'll be at the Dodge Poetry Festival with Yona Harvey and Shireen Sherrard in a reading and discussion titled Black Futures, Black Past. Really excited about that. That's October 25th at 3 o'clock Eastern. And then Poets on Craft, Writing the Life of, with Rita Dove and Janice in Harrington. They'll talk about writing poetic biographies of Black artists. And that is going to be on October 28th at 6 p.m. Eastern. And the next first books event will be November 7th. Yes, November 7th at noon. That will be with Jessica Lene, whose book Amphibian came out earlier this year, and she will be in conversation with Banu Kapil, who will be live from London. So we're going international now. We're just doing it. So that's great. Thank you so much to you two for being with us on this new program that we're doing and going with me on this journey. Thank you, Cynthia, of course, for always working with us in very thoughtful ways, for being present. And thank you to Mahogany Brown at Bowery for putting all of this together, who's handling all the tech on the back end. Such a rock star, I aspire. And thank you to everyone who tuned in and listened with us and celebrated Destiny and asked questions. Thank you so much. So that's all from us.